Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, folks. How you doing today? It is Sunday morning, 8 a.m. And we have the one and only Laura Morby with us. How you doing, Laura?
I'm doing great.
Awesome, awesome. Hey, one of the things I do is I stalk your husband. He puts out an amazing collection of content for free. And one of the things that I thought we should talk about is sometimes you lose money, right? Sometimes you lose money on a flip or a deal. And you know, you got to step back, learn the lessons so they're not repeated. But it sounds like you just lost a little bit of money on a deal. And I thought we should just share with folks that, hey, it happens.
Of course. So the first thing is, well, number one, we bought the deal because of a relationship. So I guess in that regard too, I don't know if Pace touched on that in his video.
He did a little.
But, okay, cool. So in that way, I guess we don't regret it because that person is more likely to sell us a deal next time, or maybe they'll come across one that they know is pretty juicy and they might give us a, first dibs for like a couple minutes, like, hey, I'm about to blast this. Do you want it?
Yeah, you've got 3 minutes to decide before I hit send to the entire world.
Of course, that's how it usually is, and totally get why. You got to have people who jump on it. So that was number one problem.
Well, let's talk about that in more detail, right? So what I took from the interview, and you can let me know if I'm wrong or not, but basically what you saw an opportunity to establish a relationship with someone you thought was going to be a consistent producer.
Yeah.
So you wanted to establish a relationship, let them know that you are active buyers. These are things you look for. So you knew the deal going in was skinny. You did not go in planning to lose money. No. Right?
Yeah, I think that's important too, is we didn't buy it from somebody to establish a relationship thinking, well, we're going to lose money. We thought, we'll make 10 grand or less.
Yeah, that's what he said. So again, right, you're not going in going, this relationship is so important to me, I'm going to lose 5 grand. That wasn't what you did.
Yes.
Don't do that.
No, don't do that. Don't, nothing's worth that. So,
yeah.
But so the second problem that we did is, well, number one, Cody didn't want it.
Right. You had kind of a split decision, right? You had like one person said no, one person said yes. And
and sometimes like Pace is the relationship person of the two of them. So there are some things that Cody can't see play out. And so when he sees it, he's just like, no, he doesn't understand, or like, why are you doing this? Or why are we spending money on this? And Pace is the magic man when it comes to building relationships. So if you'll like listen to Pace for like, a few minutes, you're like, oh, okay, totally.
Oh, I get it now.
And my brain works a little bit more like Cody's. So so that was the first thing. And then the second thing is we were like, well, maybe we'll turn it into an Airbnb.
Oh.
Yeah, it's in like right next to Old Town Scottsdale. It's smaller. Old Town Scottsdale is also super close to our major airport. So it might be nice for somebody who's coming in for business. It is a studio. That's another thing.
Yeah.
But, that could be great for a guy just coming in for business, doesn't want a hotel room, maybe just wants to come in, put his stuff away for a little bit and have a nice time.
Makes sense.
So, that too was like being thrown around like after we had already bought it. And so that's a mistake. Like call the HOA. That's possible. I can't tell you how much, and even going through selling the thing.
Yeah.
We had 3 days post when we were supposed to close, and we still haven't closed, and that's a whole other story, but I'll get into that because that's more my side. But 3 days post our original close of escrow, we had our buyer contact the HOA and then find out that they have like a rental restriction, that only 80% of the units can be rented. And she was like upset. And it was like, all of a sudden it was our fault and she wants to cancel. And I told the buyer's agent, I said, that's her responsibility and yours to do diligence. Like, I don't know that your client wasn't going to occupy the property. I didn't.
Yeah.
It's your responsibility. Like, you can't, it's just a thing. So it's surprising that even they were doing it.
Yep.
So I'm not saying it's like uncommon that like people don't do that, but like, we know better. We should have, during acquisition, been like, okay, well, this one's really tight. Maybe we can do an Airbnb. Let's call and see if short-term rentals are allowed. And they're not. So then we
Yeah. So let's step back from that again, because people need to hear this, right? One of the things that I always talk about is once I get something in escrow, I need to have my plan, right? You don't create your plan after you close, right? You don't create it after you own it, if you will.
Right.
So yeah, in theory, it's not, well, it's not a great option to close the deal, which means put out capital, right? In this case, all borrow, but still borrow, it's capital. And then you're not, well, we could do this, we could do that, we could do this, we could do that. That's usually don't want to do that.
No, you don't.
That's
You
bad.
wanna know before, while you're getting ready to buy the house, you want to know what the plan is. And
Yeah,
what's
the
not.
exit. Yep.
So,
Okay.
so that happened, and then I would say that the next problem that came up is, so Pace is not a reader of paperwork. It's not that, but he's just not,
Yeah.
and it's because he's busy and he doesn't have time, and so he has Cody and myself looking out for him. He
Sure.
has a transaction coordinator who's looking out for him during acquisition, because I don't deal with acquisition anymore.
Mhm.
That's his acquisition team. It's Cody and himself who are putting their eyes on it, and then he's got a TC.
Okay.
So the second problem everyone did is we got the prelim in, we got the HOA demand back, and no one read it. No one. So,
Ouch.
and what was in there was a $10,000 one-time assessment to update all of the cast iron pipes that were underneath the property. Okay. And so when you're purchasing a home, you should probably know if there's any HOA assessment, right?
Yeah,
like
you
that's
probably,
something you should do.
yeah. So folks, if you don't know what that is, one of the things that HOAs do is they're basically responsible for maintaining the entire building structure outside. And sometimes there's a big expense coming, and they give every owner a little piece of that cost.
Totally.
Yeah.
Which is fine, but then at that point it could have been a negotiating thing. So if
Yep.
it was paid attention to during acquisition, it could have been,
Sure.
hey, Mr. Wholesaler who brought me the deal, will you take $5,000 off your assignment fee, because this is something we're going to have to take care of? Or Mr. or Mrs. Seller, will you ask them if they'll cover it, because this is something that's existed when they've owned the property, and so that wasn't going on.
That seller, that original seller's like, I hope they don't see it. I hope they don't see it. I hope they don't see it. Oh, they didn't see it.
They actually passed away.
Oh no.
In the house.
Oh,
so
wow.
it was the estate, but the conversation could have been had with us.
Could have been had. Yeah.
But if the person was alive, absolutely, it should. Regardless, a conversation should have been had somewhere, and bare minimum, it should have been happening with the TC, Pace, and Cody to say, hey, this exists. What do you want to do? Because it was maybe we're going to make 10 grand deal.
Exactly. Because you went in saying, okay, skinny, 10 grand. Now there's a one-time assessment, which you don't budget for, right? You don't plan for those.
No.
And you're going to have to eat that kind of day one. You're like, whoops, now we're at 0.
100%. So then no one knew that.
Whoops.
So I got involved after I, had listed the property. So so the next thing that went wrong with this is the HOA. And this is something that you can't necessarily plan for, because a lot of properties have HOAs and most of them aren't nightmares, but this one was an actual nightmare. And by what I mean regarding that is we had to, and this is one way that you could potentially check this, is we had to get our entire rehab approved by them, and we could only work certain times, certain days. And as you know, in Arizona, it's 120 plus every day. Our guys want to start early. It's hot, and they're not able to here. And so, they don't want to work. They're usually done with their day by 2:33 because they start super early. And so they were having to make different decisions and trying to come by, and then they were wanting to come by maybe later in the afternoon as the sun was going down, and they weren't able to be there then either. Wow. They didn't want them there in the morning. They didn't want them there afternoon, evening. And then on top of it, during that, they wanted to come into the unit and inspect what we were doing, which is super rare.
I've not heard of that. Yeah.
That's very weird, right?
Yeah, that's weird.
So they wanted to come in and look at what we were doing. And, and then they, which, as you know, if you have a busybody HOA, they're coming in and they're in there during construction. Sometimes construction isn't beautiful.
Mhm.
And so then they're coming in and, anyways, it was an old man and he was grumpy and he loved to feel powerful. So, and I'm still dealing with him. So,
Oh, no goodness. Yeah. What I take from this conversation is one of the things that came in here because of the HOA is your timelines had to just blow up.
Yes, 100%. Thank you for rounding that out. That is what is wrong with this. It's not that we can't handle an annoyance. It's not that we
No.
can't handle an extra person. It's not like
Just-
Anna and myself can't handle this older gentleman on a
Yeah.
power. No, we can. It's fine. It's
Yes.
our job. We're
Yeah,
happy
totally
to do it.
Yeah.
The problem is we have hard money on the house. We're paying per day. That's
Yep.
eating into that profit even more.
Yeah, that's the key, right? And I'm just going to make these numbers up. You're spending $100 a day every day. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter if it's Monday or Sunday.
And doesn't matter if you have no one there working. Doesn't matter if you only have someone there half a day working.
Yeah. If the guy comes in and says, nope, you got to stop because I don't like this. And oh, by the way, I'm going to take 2 days off. I'll come back on Friday instead of Wednesday. That's 2 days.
Too bad. Yep.
So sad.
So we were pushing to get the project done. And then here we go. We're just trying to install some light bulbs and do some touch-up paint. And we're really trying to get it up.
Trying to get it done.
And we get called off work. You can't be there. And we're like, well, we're not hammering and nailing and cutting. We're screwing in light bulbs. And nope, you need to leave. So it was like that constantly. So we got pushed back another week because of that, because you want to list for a weekend.
Sure.
And then got into contract. And then during escrow, guess what? The HOA requires that they come through the property and inspect it.
Oh, of course.
Issue fines that we have to fix. So they come through and this is really funny. I wish I could show somebody a picture of this. So what's weird is the HOA allowed the former owner, who number one was deceased in the property, she was a hoarder. They let the property close with all that stuff going on.
Wow.
But then once we make it beautiful, all of a sudden it's like, they're mad. Okay, so this is what they got mad about. The gas line coming from the back of the stove.
Yeah.
This is a house that was built in the 60s, came out so far that the stove was sticking out. And so we think that's ugly, right? We want it to sit flush, fit into the cabinet. We don't want it jutting out. And so our guys took the gas line and pushed it into the wall. Just like an inch, okay? Just pushed it in the wall a little bit, okay? That's it. And so HOA inspector comes through and says, you touched that, you need a permit. So we get a fine. We're trying to sell this house. Guess when he tells us this too?
Oh, after you're in escrow. Or
after you're already supposed to have closed. He tells us. So we have to go pull a permit.
Because you touched the gas line.
He also told us this out like a Friday afternoon at like 3:30.
Of course he did.
And so we have to go pull a permit. And then we send our plumber, our licensed plumber over there to meet him personally. They perform the gas pressure test. Then we have to turn the gas off. Then the inspector shows up and says, your stove is attached. I can't do this, failed. And we're
what?
So then our licensed plumber is like, I promise you, I am not lying. I failed an inspection last week with City of Scottsdale because I had disconnected the stove. That inspector wanted the stove connected, so I left the stove connected. And so then we had to have him come back, disconnect the stove, cap the gas line. We called again, failed us for no access. So our construction manager, Anna, was like, hey, Mr. Man, you just failed us. Scroll up like 2 things. I gave you the lockbox code. What do you mean you don't have access? And that's totally normal for city inspectors. So I told Anna, I'm like, you and I both know that the next time you call for an inspection, you need to sit down there that entire time
Wait.
with the door open, waiting, because if you sit in your car, they're going to say that they drove by and no one was there,
Yeah.
or if you have the door closed, they're going to say it was locked and you're like, no, I was sitting there. So she sat there with the door open. We passed. So we called the HOA inspector and he goes, okay, well, I need the gas back on and I need the stove reconnected. So cool, great. Well, everyone is backed up here. So guess what? The gas company can't come out for another week and a half.
$100.
So Pace made the video like preemptively thinking we were actually going to close. And then we got like, hey, you actually need a permit. And hey, so it's actually worse.
Yeah, it's adding up every day.
It's going to be worse than he should probably make a follow-up video to that. Like
HOA nightmares. Yeah.
And the sad thing is too, is like the person who was buying it, she was afraid of the HOA. And I'm like,
yeah, you probably should be.
you're actually terrible, but sorry.
Yeah. So the question I have for you is so I've only bought in a couple of deals in HOAs. No horrible experiences. They're just what they are.
Mhm.
Would you go as far as to recommend a first timer not buy in an HOA just because they can be?
No,
Yeah.
I think that you just need to do your due diligence.
Okay.
And say, hey, as I'm doing a remodel, do you need me to approve it before we start?
Okay, so ask some questions.
And inspect. Are you going to? Because that is a first. I've never had an HOA enter the interior of a home.
No.
Never.
Yeah.
I've never had an HOA say, I mean, this was just totally new. So,
okay, good.
But it just made it bad. If you have enough meat on the bones too, and they are going to require you to do that, then it's worth that.
Yeah, for sure.
The problem is this was just like a multi-layered, like, this is a bad idea. This is a bad idea.
And look for those one-time assessments. Ask that question.
Yeah. And bad decisions. So definitely, like when you get your like HOA demand back, it's got your CC&Rs, maybe it has a CD still and it, they mailed it to you.
Mm-hmm.
Highly recommend looking at it, bare minimum.
Yeah.
And if you don't want to, just call the HOA and say, are there any one-time assessments? The funny thing is like during construction too, on top of the HOA putting these restrictions on us on like when we can work and we can only start work until we're approved. They also were halting our work because they had to send in the new flow, which is that casing that they flow through the cast iron pipes. They were shutting off the water and they were needing access to our unit for that. And the whole time in my head, while we were in construction, I was like, that's not for free.
Yeah.
How is no one talking about this? And I should have probably, sounded the alarm then and said, hey guys, like they're doing new flow repairs. There's no way that they're paying for this out of the kindness of their own heart.
No. Yeah.
This is 100% going to be a cost that's passed down to us. We need to figure out what that is. Is there a special assessment? Did we miss it? And I had a feeling I was just kind of like the whole time I was like, oh, we didn't start construction for like a month and a half because we had to get HOA approval. And like, now we keep having to stop work. And like, as it was going on, I was just like, and it was just one of those things that it wouldn't have made a difference. We would have just known about it earlier.
Sure.
Maybe it would have. We might have made different decisions on like what we spent money in.
Maybe.
Like for our budget.
Sure.
But for the most part, 10 grand is still a lot of money we're going to lose.
Yeah.
Anyways, not fun.
Not fun, but it happens. And thankfully, it only happens a couple of times. And what I really liked is it sounds like Pace, he did a great job at the end of the video, kind of saying, okay, these are the lessons we learned, or maybe we were reminded of these important lessons.
100%. And it's just about getting better and no one's perfect. And we do this all the time. And the fact that our team makes these mistakes just goes to show that no one's perfect. Mm-hmm. And another thing that I do want to touch on too is like, there are these things more often now that I'm not Pace's TC, and I'm not saying that that's something that is okay. It's not okay, but I'm Pace's wife. The decisions that are made within our business affect like me and my household and my children and my husband directly. And I see the stress that comes from that. And I see how hard pace works to make $1. And so when we're losing 10,000 of those, I can see that. And so I truly care, like to the bottom of my heart.
Yeah.
But if you want to scale, you have to delegate some of your responsibilities out because it's just not sustainable. And so you're going to have employees, and you just have to be prepared that no matter how good they are, how long they've been in the business, how wonderful they are as people, how well you train them, what kind of conversations you had. Like with Pace's TC, I was like, I'm going to have a really hard time letting go because I'm usually the one who catches these like money things. And I'm like, I'm going to have a hard time letting go, but I really want you to treat Pace's money as if it were your own.
Yeah.
And think about things like if you're telling our accountant to wire out hard earnest money, imagine that that's your family's money, and make sure that you have our team feel comfortable with the deal without having an inspection period and things like that. And that the numbers truly do make sense before you make decisions like that. And, some mistakes still happen. So, so just be prepared, you know, with an employee, they're not perfect. I'm not perfect either. I'm not saying I never made a mistake, but it seems to happen more when it's not you. And it's just, I think it's just, maybe it's like human psychology. There's just something there where you're just like, oh, well, my boss has a ton of money. He's fine.
He's fine. And, I see what he does online. I saw his house.
Yeah, but, yeah, it's just a different mindset, but
I agree.
fine, and it's part of the process, and it's part of growing. And because we have people on the team that can take these responsibilities off of us, we're able to do much more and make more money, even if we lose money and things like this.
Yeah. The big thing about losing money in this business is, you know, what's going to happen eventually, and maybe probably a couple of times. It's just that for me, it's learning the lesson and not repeating the mistake, right? That's, you know, the most expensive mistake is the one that's repeated, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, thank you for this, Laura. If somebody wants to buy some property in Arizona, given you're the top 1% agent, what should they do? Call you, email you? What do you want them to do?
My phone number is 480-717-2070, and my Instagram is Laura Morby with no spaces.
Yeah, you got to follow Laura Morby on Instagram if you just want to have a smile. That's why I follow Laura's. I smile when she posts. So thank you for that.
Yeah, of course.